very good evening to you all. Welcome back to another episode of Tech Talks 101, powered by F Code Labs. I'm Makita Patirana, your host, as usual. Now, today, the podcast, as you might have seen from our social media posts, is a bit different. We usually invite a person in the technology space to come talk to us about tech. But as we all know, Sri Lanka is currently going through an economic crisis. An economic crisis like of which we have never seen in our lifetime or our parents or our grandparents' lifetime for that matter. So it is high time that we get some perspective into what's going on in our country. What does the future hold for all of us? Now, as you might have seen, there's a lot of discussion about this topic from various corners of the internet as well as the mainstream media. So, why are we having this conversation then? What we want to do today is to understand what happened from an economic perspective and to get a sense of how we can prepare for the times ahead. To do that, we have invited an economist. Dr. Indrajith Aponsu is a senior lecturer at University of Colombo, Department of Economics. He has worked in the private sector, the government, and now in the academia. He is currently a director at eConsult Asia Limited, and his mission has been to educate the public on pragmatic economics in a way that is understandable to the general public. Sir, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure for two reasons. One is I'm talking to, I guess I can see, a very youthful crowd who are keen to know rather than being in a classroom where you're interested in doing an examination at the end of lecture. So it's a difference. The second point is that you said economics is something that you have not been doing. Your area is tech. By the way, I come from sciences. My first specialty was physical sciences, and I wanted to be a chemist. But then I changed my field gradually. I went to a multinational company, and from there I went to public sector. Then I realized that there's something called economics that we ought to know. Everybody ought to know. You said technology. Do you realize the bottom line of technology is economics? Do you realize everything we do in life, everything, I mean, of course, life is what we are, is economics? If economics is not there, either you have to be a total 100% sort of a person who doesn't want anything in return, like some of the gurus we had, or that you're completely in exile, where you don't have to worry about any resources. Now, coming to the subject of economics, to simplify, economics is about managing resources. And we all manage. So that is the definition of economics in a pragmatic way. Economics is the business of everyone. To be a beggar, you need to know economics. To be an engineer, you have to be an economist. To be a politician, you need to know economics. To be a religious person, a clergy, you all economics. Now, different individuals manage economics in different ways. And the human beings, why we are so superior to every other creature in the world, when we all started evolution at a certain point of lifetime, and we were very late entries to the whole evolution's chain, but yet now we are controlling everything. Why? How did we do that? Body-wise, we managed to economize our body. We were monkeys at some point. We were on trees. We came down in the African savannas. Then we realized we had to protect ourselves and stand up, look around. Then we found that, okay, the upper limbs are of little use unless we make a different use of it. So you've got upper limbs, the hands. And the hands got even sophisticated with fingers, nimble fingers. And on top of that, with that, we managed to create a body that gives the most economical creation in the whole animal kingdom. Why? It has the proportions to do various functions in the most efficient manner. And the most important part of us is our brain. And the brain created a system that economized everything we have. And on top of that, got the power to control everything around us. So we became the super creatures of the evolution for some reason. There's an interesting thing that I share with my students is that we are Neanderthal. Sorry, we are Homo sapiens. There was a time where there was another branch called Neanderthals. They lost their way. There's a controversy. What happened to them? Then I came across this little piece of paper from the Economist magazine, which I happened to find in a sheet of paper which came as a wrapping paper from something, and it says the extinction of Neanderthal is an economic phenomenon. So the only competition we had was the Neanderthals, and they were also gone. The Homo sapiens now ruling the world. Within Homo sapiens, there are differences. There are so-called super rich countries. There are so-called super poor countries.
Yes.
What makes that difference? Again, economics. How do you manage your resources? There are countries that are resourceful. Take, for example, Nigeria. They are sitting on the 6th largest oil deposit in the world. Look at Venezuela. They probably have the largest oil deposits in the world. Japan literally have nothing.
Yes.
South Korea had the most infertile section of Korea when it was divided. South Korea was way behind us in the 1960s. Singapore was looking at us as the model. Lee Kuan Yew said, I want to make Colombo, Singapore Colombo. How ironical now. We are talking about a crisis when we had all these, but that alone, leave that aside. In general, economics is the most fundamental principle that's driving us. It's also interesting to remember when COVID happened in 2020, economics came to a standstill. That is a wonderful thing to the whole world because economics has ruined so much around us. There were very interesting anecdotes. There was a video which people suddenly wake up and to see in India, hey, we can see the Himalayan, which we never saw for 40 years. I mean, that's amazing. The whole world, as you can see, economics has brought prosperity, but at the same time, it has brought a lot of destruction as well. So economics is not something for the economist. Why? Because everybody is a practical economist. It's a practitioner. But let me also tell you something. Unfortunately, the economics world or economics domain is basically controlled by people like us. We call ourselves economists and make a mess of the whole thing. So that is why it's important to ground economics to the basic, as a basic principle, as a basic way of living to everyone to say, look, think of your economics. And that will make a difference to you. Don't believe in models. There are so many models in economics. In fact, there are several books called Why Economists Disagree. So fundamental, they disagree because they are very axiomatic in their thinking. But practical economists will all converge into one single point: how to make my life better, how to progress my life to the next level, how to have more secure lifestyles, how to have my income sustained. Now, these are the fundamental issues we have, whether it is an individual or whether it's a country. So economics is something that cuts across every aspect. Let me also, before I wind up this little narration, is when people manage economics, it's so sad that they manage so badly. Take temples, churches, for example. Look at the amount of wealth they hold. So unproductive. I mean, these things we don't want to discuss, but these are facts. Politicians manage economics so badly, and they are not accountable. Bureaucrats, supposed to be the guardians and the drivers of economics, are unto themselves. Educated, use economics to create their bargaining power. Businesses are, of course, they are the producers. They are the ones who are driving the economies. But at the same time, it also creates not so level playing fields for individuals. Some people take the best of that. Some people take the least of it. So this is the economics that we are up against. But learning economics is most fundamental to everyone, and it's very easy. It's not a rocket science.
Yes, I think you touched upon most of the things that we are going to talk about today. You talked about inequality, why some countries are richer, why some countries are poorer. Now, the discussion today is about our economy, which is in chaos right now. And so basically, what we want to understand first is how did we get to this mess, right? We are in some very, very serious situation here. How did we get here?
Okay, to get to that point, Akita, let me just touch upon few parameters. I mean, if you want to talk of religion, you got to talk of certain parameters. So it's those parameters that you take to talk of the concepts. Take, for example, in Buddhism, we talk of rebirth, we talk of karma, we talk of Trishna. So these things are important. So in coming to economics, you learn economics in two areas. One is called economics about markets. Second, which is a much more recent one, relatively speaking, from 1930s, 40s onwards, economics of the country. Those are two different layers of it. So our talk is about the second one, what we call macroeconomics, so the macro picture of economics, right? But that doesn't mean that the micro picture is irrelevant. Actually, it's the micro picture that drives the macro picture. It's like our body. Our body has millions of billions of cells. Each one is functioning with certain responsibilities. But then when you put all that together, you don't see the cells, you see an individual, functioning individual. So economy is a functioning macro picture with millions and millions of micro cells. Let's forget about the micro cells for the time being. So when it comes to economics discussion, we have to talk about what we call economic growth, what we talk about inflation, what we talk about balance of payments, what we talk about fiscal budget. Those are four major areas of economics that we talk about. These are all interconnected. Let me just tell you the first one I said, economic growth. Take a country. Country, as you take a country, the country, like every individual, we have incomes. Every individual has an income, right? You have a student, yes, a student doesn't have an income, so therefore you're not part of the workforce. I'm part of the workforce because I'm earning income, and that income is counted. Okay, so income, but if you take a country, country's income is calculated what we call gross domestic product. Now, gross domestic product is something that we estimate in value terms in a year, how much of value we have generated in that particular year. So that's a static value. What really matters is how much of value you have enhanced from the last year. If you take it as a percentage change, we call it growth. So growth is a very critical factor for a country to say that if the country is doing well or not doing well. If you, when you said Sri Lanka was doing very badly, it has to be qualified. Some periods we did well in terms of economic. Some periods we didn't do very well in terms of economic. So then, so what do we call ourselves as? Are we bad or good? Or well, we are bad. Why? If you want to be really sound and good in economics, we should have had a constant growth in, or when you say constant, not constant, really sustain economic growth at a certain. It's like in a cricket match, 50 over cricket match. If you want to win the cricket match, you got to have a per over run rate, what we call run rate, at a certain decent level. Higher it goes, your chances of winning is higher. Okay, so for our economic growth in the country, usually we say the baseline is 5%. But that was 20, 30 years ago. Just like it changed in the cricket, 5 runs per over used to be a winning run rate. Then our guys, Sanat Jayasuriya and Ramesh Kaluvitharan, they changed the whole question. They said, unless you have 6.5 runs or 7 runs a year, you won't win. So same happened to economic growth as well. Unless you have a 6.5%, 7%, 7.5% continuously, we call sustained economic growth, you won't become a rich or a high income country. The difference between us and Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, China is just that, because they kept on having a rate which is about 7.5%, 8%, 9% continuously for several decades. So that made the difference. So we didn't have it. That's one. Okay. Second one, this is what I find the most crucial one for Sri Lanka. This is our crisis aspect. People can still have a poor growth and doesn't have a major crisis within the country. Where countries get into crisis is the balance of payment. Balance of payment is, now when we are in a country, we have to buy and sell the rest of the world. We are not in a Robinson Crusoe. So we are not on self-sufficient. We want cars, we want aeroplanes, we want trains. So where do we get that money from? We have to earn. So we had tea. Tea was a major earner. In fact, Sri Lanka was one of the richest countries in Asia because of tea, just purely because of tea. But that was an era which had certain other issues. Anyway, let's not get into that. Then, after 200 years, we managed to get another line of business. That's called garments. So those are the only 2 things that are giving us cash. Others are little small monies. But what happened to us was, we kept on buying things abroad, without looking at how much money we earn from abroad. If we take this value, two values, with the balance of payment is the entirety of dollar coming and dollars going. But then in that, there is a particular thing called very dynamic piece of balance of payment. It's called trade balance, meaning imports minus exports. Now, this is where we really mismanaged grossly. Not even the economic growth. We got economic growth. If you, for example, if you go to Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa's regime on 2005 to 2014, he boasts about high economic growth, 6%, 7.5%, 8%. But there was something really missing. That missing piece is imports and exports. To take a little chart, it's like a steep down figure, and it's going into negative, 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 negative. So much so, I'll give you a little perspective. Just draw a line in a graph from 2000, which is just 1 billion minus in the minus area, and then go to 2018, 10.3 billion in 2018 minus. Just draw a line from 1.2 to 10.2. What you see is a perfect fit. How much we have deteriorated our foreign exchange in terms of earnings versus expenditures. So in short, what we did was we had an extravagance of buying goods from abroad, but we never had the tenacity or the necessity to earn money to pay for those goods. So how did we survive? We survived on two pathetic lines of financing. One, we were living on, what we did was we imported goods, exported labor.
Yes.
Sent people to Middle East, disrupted their families. But anyway, let's not forget about the social side of it. And they kept on feeding us with dollars. When it came to 2018, we were earning $7 billion purely on remittances. So now our difference was 10.2 billion in terms of income and expenditure on real industrial goods. Then that 10.2 billion was brought down by 7 billion from those people's money. Now you see how pathetic we were to use that money to buy our Lamborghinis, to buy our Benz cars, right? That's not all. It was not enough. Of course, we were relying on another line of business called tourism. Tourism also started going up. From 2009 on, we have been hitting tourism, and it was breaking us about another 4 billion. So now, what has happened was, you are still short of billions of dollars in your income and expenditure. So what did we do? We were happily relying on loans. From 1977, we got into the habit of borrowing. It didn't matter. We kept on borrowing, kept on borrowing, kept on borrowing. But the borrowings became more and more and more. And it didn't matter to us because these borrowings were very concessionary borrowings. Meaning, they give you money at 0.5% interest. Gestation period 20 years. That means you don't pay a cent for 20 years. Then you start paying money. And we got into the habit of that money as our cash. And then we went about. But in 2008, we lost that line of money because we became a middle income. We become a middle income country. Those funding agencies kick you off from their list. Oh, they have to borrow in the expensive category, not in the concessionary category. So we lost that. Okay, and that's a good that we lost it. I mean, how pathetic it is for us to rely on that. But then, this is where we made the fundamental mistake. Now, we don't have money. What do? At home, I don't have money, not enough money. I go to the bank and say, give me a credit card. So I get a credit card. Now, credit card is different from my earlier borrowings, which was 20-year repayment period, tenor. Now, this is 54 days maximum. And the interest is 25%. Okay? I didn't bother. I went to the, which we call money market, started borrowing. Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa regime first started borrowing. They borrowed 5 billion. Now, problem with that is its tenor or the duration is 5 years, 7 years, maximum 10 years. And the very high interest rate. So you have to pay the interest every year. And what we got ourselves into a problem was we had to repay those loans as well, in addition to the interest. Interest is about few hundred million. But the repayment is 1 billion, 2 billion. That's a large chunk. So we started paying that. In 2015 to 2019, we borrowed 12.5 billion from the money. Now we had lost every possible avenues of financing our extravagance. We didn't bother. Right? And in 2020, this government comes and says, okay, we are going to stop borrowing in the money market. That's an intelligent decision. But what they didn't realize is, okay, what do you do about the existing problem? You don't have cash. They said, okay, we are going to promote push exports. We're going to stop imports. That's why they put a stop on car imports. They put a stop on various other imports. That was not enough. And then we lost 2 other lines. Remittances suddenly dried up. So 7.5 billion, which used to bring about 600 million a month, is not there. Tourism in 2019 got hammered with the Easter bombing. So 2 very, very dangerously important things happened. And the third problem was, now we have a magnitude of borrowings which had to be paid very quickly. We don't have cash. And when you started paying them, you forgot you have to pay for medicine, you have to pay for oil, you have to pay for gas, the essentials. When you didn't manage your cash, this government, they didn't manage the cash. And at the end of the day, suddenly they found, oh my goodness, our lockers are empty. They run around. So this is the crisis we are in at the moment. We have a huge debt problem, having to settle it. Now we are trying to reschedule it. We have a huge trade balance problem that has to be plugged. On top of that now, government does not have cash. So our problem has brought us to the very edge of the cliff. We don't have a parachute. We don't have a way out. We are simply clinging on to the grass there on the edge, hoping somebody will throw you a line to get out of the situation. This is the crisis.
You paint such an incredible picture of what happened in our country, and I think when you say that when our exports, basically we relied on the garment workers and the tea workers, right? We stigmatized them, and we relied upon them for the dollars that the small dollars that we had. And then not only that, when we couldn't, when the deficit got large, then we relied on the remittances of the people who are in the Middle East, who are, I mean, we all know they're suffering. And then, even when that was not enough, what we did was we borrowed money, right? I mean, it's such an incredible picture of what happened in this country. It's such an for non-economists like us to hear that and to see what happened. I think it's such an incredible way, and I'm glad you put it that way. Uh, Now, I think for those who are watching this, I think they might have understood what's at the heart of this issue right now. As you said, the present government, when they came into power, said, "Okay, we're going to promote exports." You said countries like Singapore, in the early example, they have industrialized. Why have we not been able to do that? I mean, is it something wrong with our technical capacity or our structure, our education system? We have cheap labor, but we have not been able to industrialize. This has been the dream of ours for, I don't know, for the 20, 30 years. My father is talking about the fact that we haven't industrialized. When they were young, they were talking about, maybe next 10 years we'd be able to industrialize. Then the war happened. At the end of the way, okay, this is now is our time. We can industrialize. We can bring high-end manufacturing to this country. We haven't been able to do that. We are still relying on the so-called garment workers and the tea workers to finance our lifestyles, our so-called rich lifestyles, right? Why haven't we able to do that, sir?
Okay, that's a very relevant question. And I think we should put our heart and soul into this particular question. Well, not only to analyze it, how do we resolve it? Okay, I'm not going to go that, but I'll answer your question. Why did we industrialize? Okay, to answer this question, if you ask 10 people, 10 people have 10 different answers. But I think, that's not the way to go about it. Why I said 10 different answers? I said economists have their own sects, like in religions. So if you say Buddhism is not one religion. I mean, there's so many different sects, Christianity is the same, right? Muslim is the same. So their economists also have the same thing. Unlike in sciences where you confront each other and argue and come to agreements, economists can survive to disagree. They can be on the same table and stay with their own principles and disagree. So this is very ironic. Anyway, that's being the case. What I would suggest is, okay, let's forget about the economics here. Let's look at the guys who did well. What have they got and we didn't have? I mean, that's a good way to go about it. Now, there are many complications in this. Right? Those people who talk about, I must also inform you, there are two divisions in economics, two main divisions. One is the guys who say, look, hands off government, leave everything to the private sector. Don't deal with anything that the private sector should do. Government, the more the government, more the problem. So therefore, you have to reduce your budget. In fact, presently, the prescription that we are told by the IMF is that this is the same prescription we had from 2015 to 2019. Then there's another thing, which is says government has to play a role. In perspective, if you take the economy as a bus, the engine could be the government. Meaning, engine can create acceleration. Engine can create deceleration. Engine can create no acceleration. So, engine has the capacity to push the bus on a faster track or a slower track. Okay? So, in economics, that we call policy. If we think government is irrelevant in an economy, as some people argue, let's look at the countries which developed. They didn't do that. They had the government in the most professional way, working alongside the private sector, but not mixing with the private sector. Meaning, government did not try to produce what the private sector does. Government did not do what the private sector could do. Left that to the private sector, but you directed the private sector to do this. One classic example is in South Korea. When South Korean president came into power in the 50s, he told the large conglomerates now, Gold Star, Hyundai, Samsung, look, I give you all the support. I give you unconditional inputs. You're to do export. So it was the government's push that got these guys to do things, and they became global business entities. So the government had to play a major role. And that major role is creating right incentives, creating right innovative skills, making education or universities to create out-of-the-box thinkers, critical thinkers. It's a whole spectrum of activities glued to one single mass, and that is driving the private sector. So what we did not have was our governments came into production when the private sector should be doing it better. We got into things where resources are being now carved out into the government sector, and they were inefficient. So imagine you have a large chunk of resources. 75% of your resources are managed by inefficient means. How on earth you're going to win the match? Look at the cricket team. Even if somebody who does a good innings in a cricket team, it's not going to guarantee a winning score unless everybody chips in with their contribution. So same with Sri Lanka as well. That's one. Second problem was when we have a bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is to control, regulate, create policies. On top of that, there's something very crucial. Instigate economic growth in the private sector. Create the right environment for the private sector to do business. How? Bring the cost down. Make the risk premiums lowest possible. Facilitate integration. What we did was exact opposite. We were bottlenecks in the production. We were rent seekers in the business. A rent seeker is somebody who is taking resources, something that is not due to him. Commissions are rent seekers. Everything private sector, public sector does, where they are not entitled to, are rent seekers. Politicians are rent seekers of the highest level. So we created people and we created institutions that are obstructing this industrialization. Universities, we are supposed to be creating ingenious students. Instead, we are creating broiler chicken. Broiler chicken is everybody looks alike. No difference. So we should take the responsibility of not doing our job right. Especially social sciences. Sciences, of course, it progresses in a certain way. But how much a challenge you face? How much a challenge we contribute to the private sector to support their industrialization? Private sector can put things into operation. Universities must be creating the concepts, technologies, and selling it to the private sector. We talk of, okay, now forget about South Korea. What about the US? Google, Apple. Now, people might say these are private sector guys. They were supported by the US government to the hill at the very beginnings. These are huge research projects, and it was supported by the government. The latest is COVID vaccine. Why did the private sector did such a hurried job so quickly? Because governments underwrote, okay, we are going to buy billions of vaccines, so you are no worry. And as a result, they were able to create technology. Sri Lanka, on the other hand, if you want to get one little thing done, you have to go to more than 25 different officials. And these guys are not there at one single point. What happened to this government? They said, okay, we are going to create export growth. What they did not do was, they didn't go down to the ground level with the boots on and got the public sector to do the jobs. They probably got the policy direction right, but they failed to get the strategy right. So as a result, the private sector could not deliver. As a result, we never got industrialization. Industrialization requires government support in a big way. Of course, we missed the bus because in the 80s, 90s, until about 1995, the government support can be fairly generous. Now, not anymore. The minute you give a government support, there's a body called WTO, World Trade Organization. They will get a complaint from US. Let's say we support the garment sector. Now, garments are going to the US. The minute we support the garment sector now, US government complains to the WTO and say, look, Sri Lankan government is supporting garment sector. Therefore, we are going to have countervailing penalties, meaning we are going to have an additional tax on Sri Lankan export. So it's now very difficult. However, China overcame this problem. They masterly overcame this problem, where that is why China was able to catch up with US, become the second largest economy in the world in a matter of 30 years. That is why they were able to uplift 400 million people from poverty. Nowhere in the humanity is happening. Why? Chinese government is driving the business. Okay? So, to answer your industrialization problem, we need a kind of a strategy where each one had to play a very specific role. And the last point in Sri Lanka is our political leadership is very much interested in rent seeking, meaning self-fulfillment, self-gain. Our bureaucracy is playing a double game. They are supposed to be supporting, but they are obstructing as well. Why? Because they want to favor certain groups, disfavor certain other groups. So the problem with Sri Lanka never understood the industrialization and its importance. The countries that have understood the industrialization are most recently Vietnam, Cambodia, even Myanmar, with all these issues. And as a result, they are making headway. You must have seen Vietnam is one of the largest manufacturers of electric cars. Can you believe that? And their own model. And where do they display this model? Los Angeles. Have you ever imagined that? So this is the irony. Unless we understand these little concepts, leave aside all the politics, leave aside all the economic ideology, pragmatically look at it, Look at what the neighbor had done. Do something, do 50% on that. You can make a difference. But at the moment, it's all about we are asking for oxygen because our breathing has been challenged. That's what we are now. So before we start walking, we have to get that organized. But if we are to go forward, industrialization is the key. And what we missed was because of educational problem, attitude problem, system problem, and politics problem, all created by us with our very lopsided attitudes.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think we are grasping for oxygen right now. So you laid out all the reasons why we didn't industrialize. Now we are negotiating with the IMF, as we all know. Uh, it's been hard, and I just recently watched a documentary on the financial crisis in the United States in 2008, and they interviewed the former President Bush, and he said something very funny. He said, if I go to a small town in America, and I go to a pub and I say to one of the people there, you know what, I saved I saved the depression. I saved the country from going to a depression. They'd look at him and go, nah, you just bailed out Wall Street. You bailed out the big banks. And he said, it doesn't matter what I say to the public, they will never believe me. They will never believe when I say I saved something worse that could have happened. I don't know. I'm not an economist. I don't know whether that claim is true or not. But when we were first looking at the crisis, one of the reasons why we didn't approach the IMF was because the consequences could be steep. Now, with the crisis that has gone out of hand, we are forced to go to the IMF, and we have no option but to face the consequences. I want to ask you, what are these consequences that people are talking about, and how bad will they be, and ultimately, will this help? Will this help us to turn it back?
Now, this is an interesting point about this IMF discussion. If you had spoken about IMF a year ago, everybody will say, look, no IMF, no IMF, right? Now, suddenly everybody is looking at, please IMF, please IMF. Right? This is something I find very difficult to fathom what happened. Why did we say no IMF? Why did we say yes IMF, please IMF? Why did we say no IMF? Now, what is IMF? IMF is an institution which was created in 1944 in what we call Bretton Woods Convention after the Second World War. In fact, before the Second World War finished, to talk about economic sustainability. Okay, so this economic sustainability, in that picture, there was United Nations was created for peace. World Bank, which is called International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, was created to build up Europe and also to create this infrastructure and project financing. Then there was another thing that was left, or rather two things. One is called trade, and they created what we call International Trade Organization, ITO. And the last one was, at that time, global economy has got so integrated, there's a financial economy, meaning countries are trading with each other. As a result, there's an additional burden on them to manage their foreign exchange. And even if you are very well domestically, if you don't manage your foreign exchange, you go through the tube. You go down the tube. So because of that, there was a need to have what we call financial stability. So the IMF was created. So IMF is basically our bank as well, because we have contributed to the IMF. It's an international monetary fund. It's not a bank. So, but of course, our contribution is so little. We are basically dependent on IMF. The guys who have given a lot of money are now recently China and US. They have large chunk of shares in the IMF. Okay, so what's wrong with the IMF? The IMF actually turned out to be not just an innocent financier. IMF turned out to be somebody who is propagating an ideology. The ideology is the US based, what we call Washington consensus, meaning free market, absolutely free market. Governments are bad. Leave the free markets open. Okay, it looks on surface nice because we know if you leave the free market, the market will help to make things happen. In fact, now people even talk about why not privatize the petroleum corporation, because if it had been privatized, probably would have had a different experience. People argue. Okay, so what the IMF generally says is small government and open economy and the private sector growth and financial market. Go to markets, borrow money if you want. That's why under the guise of IMF, last regime borrowed 12.5 trillion. Okay. So even now, what the IMF says is, okay, sort out with your financial market. You can borrow from the world financial market. So that means we will end up borrowing again as well. But then you ask the question, so do we have an alternative? Ironically, no. We have exhausted all the spaces we had where we could have fixed the problem before it got worse. Now we have exhausted everything. It's just a matter of hand-to-mouth existence. You see how pathetic it is. You have a gas coming in a ship, then you wait for 12 days to get the next gas shipment. Come on. How on earth can run this? So because of that, IMF becomes important. Because IMF comes with certain kind of securities so that we can borrow from other guys. Even the IMF doesn't give us a lot of cash. The minute IMF say, okay, we're going to stand alongside with you, then the other guys are, all right, IMF is standing with you, we come along. At the moment, we are all by ourselves. Okay? So this is the way I find IMF. But the real problem with the IMF is, forget about the short-term benefit. The real problem with the IMF is your first question, the question before question, preceding question. What is it? Industrialization. Unfortunately, IMF policies does not permit us to get industrialized. Why? If you have a free market, import and export freely, producers don't have a security to produce. When you don't have a security to produce, you don't invest. So what do? You buy and sell. So we walk into a buying and selling business. We might end up getting more tourists. Okay, so things might turn better in tourism. Let's say we get 5.5 billion for tourism to a 4.5 billion. And if the remittances are also flowing back in the normal way, we are basically okay now. Where's the problem? The problem is in the next Easter Sunday attack somewhere, you're going to evaporate tourism again. The minute you do that, you're talking about cash loss of 5 billion, which is massive for Sri Lanka. Millions of people on the street unable to get employed, right? So the answer to this is not to rely on unstable income generated things. They are good, let them be there. But what is important here is you got to have a base. Base comes from industrialization. This is where I have a issue with the IMF from a historical perspective. IMF is generally says, okay, combined with the global financial markets, feel free to borrow. Yes, you have a borrowing problem, but feel free to borrow because you have to make yourself looking better, and then you can borrow so that you can get out of this crisis. To get out of this crisis, borrowings are essential. But getting the borrowings from the world financial market is not the right thing. My last point, somebody called me today for a radio show, thing. The question was, what do you think of value-added tax being imposed? Now, there are several different opinions. My opinion is value-added tax was there quite a high level between 2015 to 2019. What did it do? It killed growth. What did it do? It created what we call NPAs, non-performing NPLs, non-performing loans. Go to a bank's balance sheets. There are many people who are unable to pay their loans. That's a very bad situation, very bad signal for a country. So when that happened, the high value-added taxes have not helped. In fact, it has been very unhealthy. Okay, then what's the solution? Government has a lot of expenditures. Where is the solution? Probably they should have gone to income taxes, taxing the rich, rather than taxing the poor. Value-added is taxing the poor. So you tax them, make their life even more miserable. And also affect the growth, throttle the growth. So then it's not a medium to long-term strategy. So these are my speculation. I may be wrong. I'd love to see that I'm wrong. Why? If the World Bank, IMF says, okay, we will accept this framework, your industrialization framework, but you're not doing it right. Do it properly. Do it with the trust. And then we will support you. I doubt that's the case, but IMF has currently become a situation where you can't be without it and you don't want to be with it. So at the moment, our inclination is to stand with the IMF, solve this unbelievably complicated problem before it gets worse, and then come back to some sort of a balancing situation. So it's a very difficult prediction, one can say, where we are now, where we are heading, because nothing is on the table at that. And IMF also says, look, we have still not decided. That's a bit saddening, ironic, because not so long ago, they were all looking excited. Everybody was hoping, oh, right, things are going to happen. Suddenly they say, no, we never said that. That's a media hype. It is something else. I tend to think it's a political thing. They are going to push you against the wall and say, look, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. You have this. And we have no choice. You basically have to accept it. I'm not making a political statement. This is purely, I'm looking at it from what has been happening in the world and how people have looked at these policies. If you go back to some of the write-ups on IMF policies, and you can see that they have not been very favorable. You may remember, you were talking about East Asian crisis, 1997. East Asian crisis took place. There's one country who said, look, I'm not going to listen to IMF. Who is that country? Malaysia. They were one of the first to have recovered from crisis. Much better than everybody else. Thailand was very highly affected. It couldn't recover. Indonesia, it couldn't recover. They were doing very well before. So there are historical explanations and reasons that just because somebody is giving you cash, if that cash comes with conditionality, we should be able to stand up and say, look, guys, yes, we are in trouble. Yes, we need cash, but we have this mission. We want to do that. But at the moment, we have a serious credibility. Our politicians have been so much tarnished, nobody trusts. So there's a breach of trust very badly. So as a result, we really don't know what they are doing, who is doing, what are their intentions. So in that context, we might find IMF is some sort of a relief. But whether it will be the case, only time will tell. But then the problem is, by then realize whether it was right or wrong. It seems that if it is right, no problem. If it is gone wrong, we have lost another 5 to 6 years down the line. That means our situation is going to be really a major catastrophe.
Yes, so I think you have said that we have lost trust in our system. We have lost trust in ourselves, and I think the final question I want to ask you is this lack of trust. What you're seeing right now is a lot of people are looking for a way out, especially young people. They are graduating from universities, and they are looking for a way out of the country. And this is a very unfortunate situation, obviously, because the people who tend to leave the country are the ones who are educated and have some capacity to change things. Uh, what is your advice to young people who are looking at their future, uncertain, not knowing how things will turn out, some looking for a way out, and others who are 18, 90 years old, who are just going to universities and feel kind of hopeless? So what is your advice to them?
First, this country is a blessed country. This is something people talk over and over again. But this is not to say glorify our country. Few days ago or yesterday, I was watching a video by a Chinese gentleman. He was being interviewed by one of these guys from Deranai, and he said, "In the he's teaching Chinese in Sri Lanka for the last 25 years or so, and he made some very interesting points. He said, in the 7th century, the ships that came from Sri Lanka were the largest in China. And those ships used to bring such a lot of variety of goods, gems, spices, which they found difficult to find. So that means we are a prominent country even before many hundreds of years. Right? Now, my question is this. Now we'll take that. Look, although we are like this, we were very big. We like to glorify ourselves. We love to live in history. We talk of Dutgaman. Sinhalese talk of lions. We are inheritance of lions. And we say this is our motherland. And also we say this is the most beautiful country in the world. We love to think this way. But we don't think, what is my responsibility? What is my role? You're asking about youth. Now, there was this last few weeks, this movement in the Gulf phase was a youth movement. At least that's what I saw. Initially, I realized that this will be hijacked. This will be. First, I didn't know who it was running. Second, I think even if someone is running it genuinely, it will be hijacked. That's a system. That's a system in the whole world. So, and that is what it is. But fortunately, at least they are making some impression, although politically, they seem to have lost the direction. Youth have energy. Youth have hope. Youth have the drive. Because of that, youth are the soul of a country that drives the economy, that drives the country. But at the same time, youth have to believe in themselves. You can't basically think, okay, I'm going to run away from here. Okay, that's an economic decision. That's an economic decision. And that's a fair decision. But what is important? Okay, at this point of time, I don't have a space. But I will do what I have to do wherever I am. Now, this is the youth movement should be. The guys who are here should be saying, look, we want you guys to be accountable. It's not about Gota go home. It's not about Sajid go home. They're all one bunch of polluted politicians. What is necessary here is, are we going to look for a purified guy? Purebred? Doesn't exist. Even I'm not a purebred. When I go to supposing if I become the president, I really don't know what I will do. I really don't know what kind of forces I'll face. So what is necessary here is you could have a system, a platform that drives our expectations, that strategizes our expectations at every level. You got to look at the universities and tell the academia, look, produce graduates who can think, produce graduates who can be out of the box, produce graduates who can lead. Then you tell the politicians, look, you're going to make you accountable. You can't be there unless you can do the job. And you should at least have the leadership to do that. There were some presidents who had done some kind of these things. Then you look at the businesses. Tell the businesses, look, you got to drive and run the economy. Not to make super profits, but to make profits, but at the same time make sure that there's a broader society that must benefit out of the fruits of its success. So your slogan is not just looking at one particular individual, but it's about a whole chronically ill system should be changed. Can it change? Can. I believe you only need a proper campaign that can sustain on principles, on strategies, on specific goals. Forget about the individuals. No matter what you do, individuals are individuals if you have a rotten system. What makes a Western country different from us is it's not that they are better. Look at UK. The Prime Minister in UK, he looks a joke. He looks a joke. Right? But of course, he can't do the things that we guys do here because there's a system. And that system has checks and balances. So he is still trying to stick to his position in a very shameful way. But he will survive. He will survive. But the system had the checks and balances which will make them accountable. Same thing happens in the US. So don't think we are bad guys. We are not bad guys. We are very good. In fact, I think we are one of the best in the world. Why do I say that? Because we are not fundamentalists. Look at COVID. How easy was it to sort out COVID issues? See how complicated is it in so-called developed countries. I saw tsunami hitting Sri Lanka. I was in the thick of it because I live by the sea, 100 meters from the tsunami zone. I'm in the tsunami zone. So behind my house is the sea. I saw how overnight things changed. I saw the aftermath of it, the chaos, but at the same time, I saw how quickly we recovered. Same thing happened in the US. Katrina,
Catherine.
they are still not recovered. So you see, it's important to see these differences. I remember in 2013 or 14, when I drive to Colombo, it's a mess on the main road, Gold Road. I always thought, why can't somebody fix this? Then at that time, they brought a law, no lane change as you are driving. A pilot project for 3 days. Do you realize how effectively it worked? I could feel it. So you can change these people to do the right thing in a matter of day or two. The thing is, there's no one to undertake that challenge. There's no one to sustain that practice. There's no one to understand the value of it. Even the educated, how much violations we do on this road. Do we care? Every time I violate the traffic, I'm adding a negative value to the economy in terms of its outlook, in terms of its physical delays, in terms of various other issues that are coming around. Do I care? No. That's humans. So humans have to be told what somebody must fix it. For this country, what is necessary? You got to have one set of laws that works for everyone. That is transparent. That gives empowerment to people. What is happening in this country now? The laws are to now empower the super classes and take all the rights of poor classes. I'll give you an example. When I was driving my double cab to the university and never be caught for 3 years, not a single day I have been caught checking my licenses. One day somebody stopped. I said, "Look, you know that I've never been caught before." Then he said, "I'm sorry. I'm from the city police. I'm sorry I caught you." I said, "No, that's not my issue. My issue is, why did you do that before?" Then he smiled. I said, "My issue is not even that. Though you didn't stop me, you stopped every little fellow. Three-wheeler drivers, motorcyclists, Yubobata lorries. Why?" You know what he said? "You belong to a different class. If I stopped you, if I caught you, what you would do is you will call a DIG and give me the phone and say, 'Look, DIG is calling. I can't take that crap, sir.'" Now that epitomizes how we function in this country. We can't blame politicians. We have to blame ourselves. So youth should look at these principles, and youth must be able to universalize these principles so that they can see the broad picture. And youth must sustain their energy to bring about a change. That's the way forward for this country. And I must tell you, this country can be revived very quickly. Even in this crisis. Now there is a big crisis looming in the future. Not so long down the road. What is it? There's a food crisis. There's a massive food crisis in the horizon. Ukraine and Russia are two large producers of food and fertilizer. Both are out of the system. Africa is going through a major challenge. World Food Program is talking, pleading, we've got to do something. Now, Sri Lanka, when we are relying on so much of food imports as well, better be very careful now. What do we do? Tell everyone, look, there's a crisis. Let's do something. As we did during COVID times, we should try to do that. Now, that's the way you approach national problem, national challenges. There's no point complaining. We are a society, we are a community, we are a population of complaining. Social media, everybody is complaining. Who is really okay? Leave aside the complaint. It is something I can fix this. Now, when I talk like this, I'm also a talker. I have not done anything about it. I have not planted vegetables in my little garden. But there are people who are doing it. There are people who are recycling sugar to generate electricity. Not a big deal. It's not rocket science. Why don't we do these things? We have so much of resources at our disposal. Unlike African countries, where even water is a precious commodity. We don't do that. So, for the youth, there are economic issues, but the economic issues are very much coming alongside our attitudes as well. So youth have to be more educated with these issues. This is why learning economics is very fundamental. Everybody, irrespective of your discipline. You must stop teaching religion, start teaching economics to everyone. How important it is to a little child, how important it is to be self-sufficient, how important it is to be coming out of the comfort zone. Now that is kind of teaching structure. So I would say there is economics. That economics is not very complicated. That economics is the economics we practice. And if we manage it right, we manage ourselves right. And as a community, that synergy bring about a major change to our attitudes and our progression. Educated must be humble, simple, down, be able to look at criticism, take it, go through mistakes, do failures. Failures are the pillars of learning. How much we fear failures. So this is the message. In fact, I told one of those senior ministers, okay, we have a serious problem. There's a serious problem in the horizon. This I said in 2021. We need to push exports to the maximum. He said, yeah, we have done all the policies. I said, look here, you're talking about fishing on the beach, having your rod placed in the deep sea. You're seated on the beach. No, you got to go to the deep sea. How do you do that? Get down to the business level. Talk to them. Hold their hand. Tell them, look, okay, we are giving you incentives. Not enough. We want to hold you. We want to support you. Get the bureaucracy to work. Help. Now that is what I saw in a situation when I was assistant director at the export development. I was very young, your age, and at that time the president was President Ranasinghe Premadas. I'm not an admirer of Ranasinghe Premadas, but I saw one thing. He said, every exporter, you have any problem, call my presidential office. That's a very pragmatic policy. How? The minute it took just few days to change the whole culture in the organization. Before that, exporters come, hang around, wait till the officers make their telephone calls, chats, lunches. That's so bad. I was appalled by that sight as a young officer. And then this guy comes and says, look here, there's an issue, you call us. It changed the whole lifestyle. Whenever somebody is walking on the corridor, officers go and ask, what can I do for you? And getting things done so quick. And as a result, it was moving. Mind you, it was Premadasa's time. Garments got to the highest level. Remember, 200 garment factory project was his brainchild. So if you want to see something, you got to sit and push it hard. So I told the minister, see what you should do. You should lead the private sector to do the things, support them to the hill, and every SME should be supported. His reaction was, I said, failed SMEs, talk to them, give them another chance. I said, look, failed ones basically fail. We don't give them another chance. I said, look, in academia, there are guys who fail, do extremely well afterwards. Failure can be due to various reasons. So in the business of economics, we would say it's a learning curve. So this should be the way forward. Now, these are the talks we try to share. But how much these talks can get translated at the strategic level, it's another issue. But why I'm saying these things here in this forum is, assuming that there are a lot of youth who are listening, I'm inviting you, get out of the traditional thing, get out of the negative thinking. Think. There's always a possibility. Every crisis offers opportunities, provided if you know how to translate opportunities into strategies and to outcomes. That is possible. That is possible. Even in this very, very serious crisis, things can change, hopefully.
Well, I mean, that was such an interesting point, and as you said, I think as young people we have to educate ourselves and we have to contribute. And I mean, on that theme, F Code Labs was founded by three graduates from University of Colombo who wanted to bring dollars to this country. So I think our founders share the same vision. On that note, sir, thank you very much for joining with us. I think it was a very interesting
Okay,
conversation.
just one more thing. Are there any
Yes.
questions? But this is something that drives me to, I mean, every conversation, I like people to ask me the most awkward question. Is there
There was
anything?
actually one question. Yes, so there was one question. The question was, let me pull it up. Uh, yeah, so the question was, when we do get, this is actually regarding the exchange rate. When we do get inputs from the IMF, where would our dollar rate be? Will it be around 300? I think people are worried about this dollar rate because obviously the prices are going to go up. So the question was, with the IMF assistant, where would the dollar rate be at after all of this?
Thank you so much. That's a very relevant question. I hope there can be more questions like that. Okay, dollar is a peculiar thing for two reasons in the present scenario. One is we have an immediate crisis. As a result, our exchange rate has gone through the roof. It's still very unstable. So there's a demand and supply will determine the price of the dollar or the price of the foreign currency. So in that case, what has happened now is we have a huge demand. Remember I said our demand for imports is about 20 4 billion, 22 billion in 2021, the highest. Our exports were 12 billion, so we have a deficit of 10 billion, meaning there's a deficit of supply of dollars. So what can happen when there's a deficit? The price goes up, right? Price goes up. Now, on top of that, we have a serious dollar problem on a day-to-day basis. That's what we are experiencing now. That came about because of lack of remittances and lack of tourism. So at the moment, we buy something with the cash, now we have no dollars. So when that happens, there are what we call speculators. There are guys who are speculating on the currency. They are economic scavengers or economic vultures. I'm not saying it in a bad sense, but that's how they're not producers. They just wait for somebody's carcass to thrive on. So they are pushing the dollar up because knowing very well there aren't enough dollars because they make a profit of that. IMF coming in is going to have a breathing space for this stalemate. So hopefully IMF realizes, which I think is going to happen. And if Japan steps up, if China comes in, we need $5 billion to $6 billion. If that was on the table, we would have stabilized the exchange. But it was not there. So assuming that the fact that IMF is standing, the fact that we are now not going to pay out our cash yet, as it was done in the last 2 years. So we are trying to keep the money for essential. So therefore, the exchange rate is now in a little stable scenario, 360, 365. But if the IMF things sort out, if we manage to accumulate certain amount of dollars, the dollar rate comes down possibly to about below 300. But that, with a lot of uncertainty, we really don't know. Even the government does not know where would they get money. So at the moment, that's the situation. But the other scenario is, for some reason, if our exports cannot realize, our tourism cannot be restored, and our airports, as speculated in social media, is getting affected. That means these are sure incomes we have. Imagine we have the same thing in our ports. So that's a massive problem we are going to have. Once it happens, that can stay for a period of time because they won't come back again, even though we restore our things. So because of that, there is a major crisis looming around us. On top of that, if the food crisis coming with food prices going up massively, we are in for a big problem. So that means the exchange rate can even go to 400. So here we have a major interval in which the exchange rate. At the moment, it looking some kind of stable compared to what it was. And also, if the government can break this formal money market activities, we can at least expect a certain amount of dollar flows, like 400 million a month. So that if that happens, so it's not only the IMF. IMF coming in will restore various things, and that will lead to so many other lines of business that we have lost. If we get over the fuel crisis, we might be able to canvas for tourism. So tourists, at least, hopefully something will come back. So that means that pressure on the dollar is down. So this is the real scenario at the moment. Me giving a figure or anybody giving a figure is purely speculative, and that is not to be expected with any certainty.
Yes. So I think there was another question, and you talked about this broadly about the issues in our education system. So the question was, what do you think about our education system and what needs to change? I think you talked about this a lot.
I do have something to say about that.
Yes.
Our education system should be at least, of course, the school education system cannot be changed in a hurry, but the university education system is at a crucial point of your development because you become a youth when you enter the university. You become a free person when you enter the university. You become somebody who can make decisions independently when you enter the university. So it's a very important point in our life development. So universities should be looking at this very seriously. They should go back to the drawing board and say, look, what do we really want to see our graduates become? Should they be looking for jobs or should they be real graduates with right attitudes, right expectations, and creativity and leadership? We lack leadership, we lack creativity, we lack attitudes, we lack teamwork. So graduates have to be driven into that. Education also should be linked with the industry production in a big way. Your engineering faculty, it's not just the traditional things. You've got to explore new areas, create new inventions, and sell these inventions to the private sector to translate them into businesses. Everybody has to play a role. So education is a big picture. It can't deliver things immediately, but it definitely can start a transformative change over 5 years. Within the 5 years, you can change. And that is going to be a big, big change in our status quo now.
Yes. So I think that was a really valuable thing, and I'm sure the people who are listening will take that to heart. So I think we've been having this conversation for over 1.5 hours now, uh, uh, and I think I just want to thank you because it was very informative. We obviously right from the first things you said about basically how we are financed by the very people we stigmatize, right from that moment onwards. I think you really laid out what went wrong and how we can actually turn this around, because ultimately this is our crisis to solve. Nobody's going to fix it for us. We have to fix it for ourselves. And with that, I think we have come to the end of this session. And once again, sir, I want to say thank you so much for joining with us.
Thank you so much, Akita. It was so much pleasure. And I was energized and I felt really elated by this opportunity to talk to you guys. And it will be my pleasure if you want to ask anything later on, even. And there are many issues that we need to address. And if we create this, what we call critical mass of thinkers, we start a business, we start a strategy. That's the way to go about it.
Yes,
Okay.
that's certainly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Night.